Yeah, it says we're online. Woo! All right, let's do it.
Just start playing.
What's up, everybody? My name's Indy, and that gentleman way over there, that's Mr. J. Powell. And in the middle, we have Red Vonix, and it says Lady Aviana. That's totally not your name.
It could be, but it's not.
It could be your name. What the heck happened? And this is Indie Game Business. How's it going, everyone?
It's cold in Colorado, but it's nice. How you doing?
Yeah, I was just saying we're finally going to hit freezing here, and I'm like very thankful that it's finally winter. Tired of being hot and sweaty and nasty. So welcome to our, as soon as we figured out when we're doing shows schedule lately because of everybody's travel, but we've got Red back with us here for the second time, and we are talking about Tokyo Game Show in Japan and why it's all different from doing things over here in the West. So, and yeah, I still don't think we're live on LinkedIn.
Huh.
I have no idea. So anyway, oh wait. Yes, we are.
All right.
We are. So that was the problem. All right, we're good to go. So Brett, I know we've scheduled and rescheduled and scheduled and rescheduled. And so it's been like a month or two since you actually went to Tokyo Game Show, right?
Yeah, it's in early September. Well, sort of mid-September-ish. It's like the 12th through 14th, something like that.
So overall, before we get into all the details, I mean, how was it?
It was amazing. I mean, the show itself is always a lot of fun. And since I know a lot more Japanese this year than I did last year, I kind of enjoyed it much more. I got to go around, really see the games that we'll never see in America and hope that we will. Get to enjoy a lot of the sights and everything. What's interesting over there is that, for those who don't know, here in the States, they pretty much banned booth babes entirely, but in Japan, they have not. And they are quite prevalent throughout the entire convention. So you get that, and they advertise all kinds of games. Like, there's even a Disney game. They had some booth babes there that you could take photos with. So I took photos of a lot of people. I got to play a lot of the games. It was a great time. And then for me personally, I was able to situate myself for the convention this year to really take solid advantage of it, which is what I'm here for, to sort of share what I did with all you fine people. And you too, Jay.
Yes.
And you too.
So where do you want to start? I mean, Tokyo Game Show is one of those that's up there at a pinnacle of shows that all of us in the industry want to attend, not necessarily to do business, but to just go and experience it. Where do you start? I mean, so how far out do you usually start planning, and what types of games are going to be the most successful over there? I mean, because I know like the indie market doesn't really exist in Japan.
It does not. You just asked me like 7 questions there.
Well, I know. Welcome to my world.
Yeah. Well, how about where to start first? I mean, usually, I kind of tend to know that I'm going, or hope that I'm going earlier in the year, so I kind of plan for it. But really, I get I get everything moving maybe a month in advance. People seem to, in my experience at least, plan things very late when it comes to something like Tokyo Game Show. But you also have really good meeting systems, which I know a lot of the stateside convention things have meeting systems too, but they're absolutely trash because all you get are advertisements on them. But the one for TGS is actually really good. And that really kicks off about a month in advance. That's really when you kind of start your official planning of what you're going to do there. But obviously, like any convention, knowing in advance is good. And TGS has the indie booths and everything too, like a lot of other conventions. But you have a 99.999% chance of not getting accepted, so it's kind of not really worth your time or money to try and get into that. It's more worth your time, money to do business there, just like at any convention.
All right, so wait, which indie booth? I mean, do they have like indie mega booth? One, there's so many indie booths now. Anyway, which indie booths are actually there, or is it like the Tokyo has their own indie area?
Yeah. It has a particular name, and the name's escaping me, but it is their own thing, basically their own thing of their own indie area that you can submit to and pray to whichever god / goddess / other that you're going to get in. But don't plan on it. But yeah, there is that, and you get a you can purchase either a 1 or 2 space area, which one space area can be maybe like 5 feet or so, something like that. If that's about 5 feet, and you set monitor and you share your game.
So, how many are there? The indie teams that are there, are they mainly Western teams, or is it a lot of Japanese indie teams?
It's mostly Western.
Who's around you, basically?
Mostly Western teams. When I was there this year, there was a few teams that were localizing their games into Japanese, but I learned they actually had offices in Japan, and these were indies big enough to actually have offices. So you're going to get a lot of the bigger indies there. So little unheard of indies like myself, you won't find us there.
So how do you think that you got accepted? I mean, because that's quite an accomplishment.
Oh, I didn't get accepted. I just bought tickets once. We submitted our game numerous times. They always turn it down. Which actually was no, that was actually hilarious last year because we set up the game because somebody we just ran into, just some rando, wanted to play it. He's checking out Potato Tail, and he's like, "Oh wow! So where on the show floor are you?" I'm like, we didn't get accepted." And he just stares at me and goes, and like yells, "How the f did this game not get in?" And like all the Japanese people just turn and stare, like, and I'm like, "Hey, you're asking the wrong person. That's them." But then later on, and this is again last year, not this year, localizer that we've been talking to for translating the game in Japanese. She wanted to see the game, and they had these tables there at the indie section. So we sat down, set up the game, and everybody starts checking it out. And my buddy there, who's helping to translate between me and the localizer, he kind of points behind us. We turn around, there's a crowd of people there watching our game, becoming so large it's actually blocking 2 of the other indie booths. And the people running those booths just staring daggers at me. And I'm like... Cat game, sorry, checking it out. And my buddy there. So no, we didn't get in, but everybody I've talked to seemed to think we should have. So I don't know how they judge things. I just don't even bother that anymore because it's honestly not worth it to even try and submit to the shows. It's more worth it to go to these shows and do some freaking business, man.
All right, so did you pitch your game in meetings at the Tokyo Game Show?
Yes.
Did you demo your game? That's the question. Not pitch. Demo. Did you demo?
Last year I did, and people loved it. But this year I went with the mantra of don't even bother demoing your game. I just showed videos of it, and from the videos alone, people were very interested.
See, I was at Poznan for a game industry conference in Poland last week, or actually last weekend, and it was interesting because it was the first time since you and I had actually mouthed off that you shouldn't be demoing your game at conferences and meetings, and then I was sitting on the flip side of that, so I was the one being pitched games for 2 or 3 days straight, and it's like everything else. Some people's demo went perfectly fine, and some didn't. And the ones that didn't, I was like, don't worry about it. It's perfectly fine. I mean, and I went through the whole, reasoning why you shouldn't stress over it, and everybody's out here seeing all this stuff. And sure enough, it's like I get back and I've got my notes here in my handy dandy All My Friends Are Dead book, and
it's a good book.
It's you get, even when you're trying to take notes during a meeting as someone who's being pitched these games, it's kind of like you pick one or the other. Do you want to take notes, or do you want to be engaged in the conversation? And so I'll have half-hour meetings that have like 2 lines of notes in it because I was actually engaging with that other person. So it's one of those things that the more I think about it and the more we go to these shows, the more I believe in it. But it's nice that you volunteered to be the guinea pig on that for 2 days, for 2 shows straight now.
Well, here's the secret. I didn't have a choice. My laptop died. I'm on my way to PAX with meetings. I'm on the Sounder, which is like this nice train in Seattle, hanging out with my friend. And I open up my laptop. I'm like, okay, gonna get everything ready. Maybe do a little polish on this demo before our meetings. Oh, it didn't start. The laptop completely died. And I'm not going to say what company it was that the laptop came from because their service has been terrible. I'm still trying to get it replaced. It was a hardware failure. So yeah, I didn't have a choice.
Well, it worked out. It worked out in the end. That's what matters. Well. All right, so let's dive into the questions that we actually had for today. So, sum up for those of us who've never been, and I've never been as much as I want to go. What is the Tokyo Game Show all about?
So, Tokyo Game Show is a 4-day convention for business and fans to basically geek out over games. They do this wonderful thing where they split it into 2 days of business followed by 2 days of public. And something I really wish that events like E3 here would do, because most of the people I know who used to go to E3 stopped going because E3 is pretty pointless now, unless you're a fan, which is fine for fans, but not for the rest of us.
I think E3 is now officially a consumer show.
I'll believe it.
No, I mean, I think they officially announced.
Like, officially.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, if it works for them, this means the rest of us won't be. Well, I do all my business at GDC anyway, which is a whole other mess to discuss because how damn expensive GDC is. But that's where I get all my business. Well, that and sort of now TGS. So, but yeah, so it's a 4-day event split into 2 days and 2 days. The first 2 days, the business days, are actually really nice and calm because the general demeanor in Japan is so much more quiet than anywhere in America. Like I went to PAX Prime literally just before TGS. I went to PAX and then flew from Seattle to Japan for TGS. And every day at PAX was so loud, even in like the meeting rooms was so loud. And then every day of Tokyo Game Show was so quiet. Like literally on the show floor, we spoke quieter than I'm talking to this microphone hanging above me.
I can't even imagine that.
It's wonderful. You can actually communicate with people and get stuff done. But yeah, a lot of what you're going to see there. You'll see a lot of the games from the AAA companies that make it to both sides, like The Evil Within, which is also over there and has a different title, but they always advertise heavily. A lot of the Squeenix stuff that go to both countries, like Doom Eternal was actually pretty big over there, probably because it's Squeenix. Final Fantasy VII, of course. Then you see a lot of games that aren't coming to the States. Like Disney is doing a new Tsum Tsum game for the Switch, which when I asked them, they said it's going to be a Japanese exclusive. That and mobile titles. Like I know here in the States, you go to things like back when E3 was more of a business show, at least where I went. Mobile titles are shoved off to the corner, like the black sheep of the industry. Nobody wants to talk about or know exists. And in my personal opinion, don't even bother because you're not going to make any money there. But in Japan, they literally are on the center of the show floor.
Oh yeah,
they're huge. And just from being on the trains and stuff in Japan, you look around and everybody's playing them. You look around trains here in the States, and I never see anybody playing mobile games, but there, you don't ever see people not playing mobile games. And I mean, it's not the stereotypical, guy holding his phone, with his legs spread 75 miles wide while trying to, bore people up or something. A lot of them are like women, they're playing RPGs, and guys playing sports games, everything in between. It's everybody games. Even elderly, I saw playing games on their phone. It is literally everyone.
I mean, but if you watch, you see that in the U.S. now too, because it's like
growing.
The final linchpin for me was years ago. I guess Candy Crush had been out for a year, and we were sitting in a theater, and two women who had to, I mean, if they were 80, I would be impressed. They probably might have been past that point. But before the show starts, as we're waiting, the lights haven't gone down yet. One of them pulls out her phone and starts playing, Candy Crush. And I just started dying laughing. And my wife was like, what? And I said, look, we've hit everybody. And even on my flight back from Poland, there was an older guy, and he was sitting there playing, because Lufthansa has really nice in-seat screens and stuff. He was sitting there playing Sudoku and poker half the flight back on these flights. And so it's, if you watch now, part of the problem is we, as a culture, we are so used to seeing people on their phones. It's like we just don't even see them. You don't notice because somebody's got their head down and they're on their phone. But if you look, you'll see. I mean, it's amazing how ingrained games are in society now. But yeah, I know, in Japan, mobile is a completely different beast,
It really is. And the kind of games they play over there, too, are very different from what we play over here. Which is kind of nice for me, because the games we play over there personally appeal to me more than we have over here.
So what? All right. So touch on that. So what are the major genres or differences that you see at Tokyo Game Show that you don't necessarily see here?
You see a lot of a lot of RPG inspired titles, which you don't see as much over here. I mean, you get some RPG elements here, but over there you get the hard RPGs and stuff. Those, and also story games. That's, which I know is definitely becoming more popular in the States and the UK and such, especially from a lot of smaller indie developers, like Dream Daddy, games like that. In fact, I got a chance to play the Japanese version of Dream Daddy. They were on the indie floor, and it was wonderful, because if you search my Twitter history, I got to make my daddy, who looks me, and the developer, she had to walk away, but she comes back, she goes, oh my god, that looks just like you did a good job.
Yeah, that's not creepy at all, Red. No worries there. If you're making your dream date to be you, that's
Well, except I think you play as the daughter, so technically I was my own daddy.
Oh, okay, yeah, wow. That's now we just went a little step further too. So yeah. Anyway,
so you get story games like that, and those are pretty big. RPGs are pretty big. Yeah, and I saw some baseball titles too, which are interesting.
Well, all right. So this is interesting, because the dating sims started in Japan, and now they have been imported over here, and they're seeing a lot of success. Interesting thing is, when the Kentucky Fried Chicken sat down to do a game to promote their stuff, they went with a dating game where you can date the Colonel.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of all the things, we're sitting here talking about it like it's something that's only, big in Japan, but we've got a major company, advertising company, that said, okay, of all the types of games that we want to make, this is what we're going to do for an advert game, for lack of a better word. And it was a huge success. I mean, it was all over the press for a month.
And Yuji, you kind of touched on something really interesting there, because when you're in Japan, from what I've seen over the past 20 years of working in the industry, a lot of the games and the genres that become big over there first eventually almost always trickle out and become a big deal in other countries. Like you had, music games, you have, of course, dating sims, story games, all of that. And all of those started there. Take your time.
And now we're stealing them from everybody. Sorry, my phone was buzzing. I couldn't figure out what it was.
That's okay.
You know me and my attention to detail here. So where does Tokyo Game Show fall in the spectrum of events? Because we have things like PAX. Let's put PAX on one end, because it's primarily a consumer show. Then in the middle, we have things like Gamescom. Even GIC that I was at this week there was a dedicated business center where all the business meetings were taking place, and then there were 4 or 5 halls that were for the consumers as well. And so those are going to be in the middle. And then on the other end, the strictly business shows, it's things like, Game Daily Connect and Pocket Gamer Connects, and I don't know if Nordic Game Conference is split or not anyway. But I mean, does Tokyo Game Show fall in the middle there? Not just because there is a section for doing business, but how much business can you expect to get done there as a Western indie developer? I mean, are you meeting with Japanese publishers? Are you going to walk out of there with a relationship that's moved forward to some sort of publishing deal? How do you set your expectations, when you're headed over there?
So the event itself, I would almost compare like what E3 used to be, but what E3 should have become. The fact they split it into 2 days business, 2 days public is really useful for everyone. They also do have a dedicated business section, which this was the first year I actually paid the extra to get that. And when I say paid the extra, TGS doesn't cost anywhere near the exorbitant prices the American events charge you. And I can't speak to other international events. I haven't been to them or look at the prices, but I paid about $250 American to get what was called a gold business pass. And that got me into the business meeting hall, excuse me, and also gave me access to their basically their business reservation system where I could set up meetings with other people. Thanks to that, I had 11 meetings with different publishers and other development studios, other kinds. And there's a lot of potential that could come out of all. Even still, the back and forth is still going on. And it was definitely extremely worth it. And of course, just running into random people on the show floor, parties and such like that. So where it stands, to me at least, TGS has now become one of the most important events to go to in a given year.
Really?
Basically, that and GDC are the two events I see as the most important.
Do you think it's a bigger draw than Gamescom?
I've never been to Gamescom. Though, funny story, I'm here planning to go to PAX and TGS, and I'm not getting a single damn email if anybody wanted to set up anything for those. But man, the Gamescom emails, I got like 30 of those a day. I had to keep telling people, oh no, I'm going to go to Tokyo Game Show. You going to be there? They go, what's TGS? I'm like, I hate you so much right now.
But before, and I think in many ways that Tokyo Game Show has fallen off the radar for, countries, I mean, for the US and Europe, because we have had so much, E3 took over for a while, but I mean, I think E3 is a gigantic waste of time for an indie developer to go to. But, you had so much when we were growing up anyway. It was all about Tokyo Game Show. That's where Nintendo was. That's where Sony was. That's where everybody wanted to go because that was the mecca of video games. But now, partly due to saturation of, all these different conferences everywhere, people just don't think about it anymore. And I think part of the reason is not only that we have so many conferences now, but the Japanese market for Western games has become so different than us. It used to be everybody over there was playing Final Fantasy and everybody over here was playing Final Fantasy. But now there's a much bigger wall between the Japanese game market and the Western game market. And then, the same with China. China's its own little world as well. But a $250 ticket to get a pass for, business and business matchmaking, I mean, that's cheap. That's what we charge for the full-blown pass to our virtual event. So, I mean, that's an amazing value. I mean, you got to figure out flights and hotels and all that kind of good stuff too. But
it still costs less than most people think.
Does it? I mean, so what? So, I mean, obviously your flight is going to depend on, where you're coming from. But to stay in a decent hotel for Tokyo Game Show, how much is it a night?
140. And by that hotel, I mean, I stay in the one connected to the convention center.
Yeah, and so compare that to GDC, which is 300 to 500
for a very scary hotel in the worst part of town where the Lyft drivers refuse to pick me up.
Yeah, exactly.
True story.
I mean, I've stayed in that area as well. You're talking about the Tenderloin. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's the only place anybody can afford to stay.
Yeah, I mean, and I didn't stay. Last time I was at GDC, I didn't stay in that area. I stayed on the other side of it, so I could still walk to the show. But yeah, and I was paying $350 a night. It's ridiculous. So, like I said, your flight's going to vary, but $140 a night and $250 for a full pass. That's a good deal.
And that's only because I wanted to be attached to the convention center. If I was willing to walk, get my fat ass 10-minute walk or something, I could probably done I think it was 80 a night or less.
Wow.
And I'm not talking hostels. I'm talking just smaller nearby hotels, capsule hotels, things like that.
Like a 3-star, 4-star.
Holiday Inn.
Yeah. Here's the funny thing. This is what I always, find hilarious when I travel. I can stay at, like a Holiday Inn or a Courtyard by Marriott, which is generally a 3 or 4-star hotel when you look on all these sites, and I get free high-speed internet, or I can stay somewhere like, the JW or, a Novotel or something, which is a 5-star hotel, and they want to charge me $20 a day to get on the internet. I'm like, I'm already paying far more than I need to be for a place to sleep. I don't need to be raked over the coals on this side as well. I mean, I would, if you've never been to Gamescom, I highly recommend it. It's like taking E3 and GDC and slamming them together, and that's what you end up with. I mean,
from all those emails I got this year, I'm talking to my wife about it, and she's sort of my CFO, business admin. And she's like, maybe you should go to Gamescom next year. And I'm like, I could do Gamescom, then PAX, then TGS. And she's like, you're not rich. But regardless, because Gamescom is in Germany, right?
Yeah.
So I might be brushing up on my Deutsch. We'll see.
No, you don't have to. Trust me. I speak none, and I get around.
Everybody told me the same thing about Japan. And then I learned Japanese after my first trip.
No, I'm serious. Trust me. I have not learned. The only thing I can do in German is order a beer. And that's really the only thing I need to do in German. But that's beside the point. It's very, English speaking, especially when you're in the business area. It's everybody in there speaking English. I mean, you might have 1 or 2 people that you run into that don't speak it. But, Cologne, where they do it, even most of the people in the town speak English too. So
that's definitely a difference now with Japan. There are a lot of English speakers, but knowing Japanese is going to get you way, way, way further. Like I even remember just in the business section alone, they had one woman there who spoke English, and as soon as she sees somebody who looks like they're from America, guy, she runs over and starts doing all the translating, and I'm like, I got this. And there's even this dude from where was he from, Jamaica or something, I forget. Anyway, he didn't know any Japanese. He's there trying to get our room, because you basically set up a room or a table, and they give you a number for it, so you can come back and have the table reserved for you, and you do all that through the app, which is really nice. So go up there, and he's trying to get it, and he's trying to say what number it is, and he doesn't know the Japanese for it. So I'm like, and so they're like, oh. But there's definitely a language barrier there. So knowing Japanese or at least some level of Japanese for TGS, it sounds like it's going to be much more useful than knowing some German for Gamescom.
So how did you go about learning the Japanese that you did? Is it something where you can, take you a little handy dandy English to Japanese business book, or did you actually take some courses and get basics in Japanese, or how do you approach it?
So I'm personally terrible when it comes to school. I pretty much failed my way through high school, and I dropped out of college because for me, none of it worked for me. I'm better self-trained. Like, I'm a self-trained programmer, self-trained for most of what I do. So I self-trained also in Japanese. I actually have a whole bunch of apps on my phone there. So I use those to teach myself. I'll be sitting there in bed or on the toilet or something, and I just it's like toilet Japanese.
It's toilet.
That's funny.
Like, for anyone curious, I'd say some of the best ones, Wanikani, because it helps teach you the kanji itself. Then there is Tokoboto, which is actually now just called Japanese Dictionary on Android. And that I found is really good for looking up kanji and words you don't know. And then also apps like Memrise and God, there was another one I was going to recommend. Oh, Duolingo also. So I pretty much just use those all in conjunction with one another. And also Drops. I actually paid for Drops. And Drops is sort of teaching you the kanji as well. So you can kind of do that or Wanikani. But yeah. So toilet Japanese, that's all I learned.
But I mean, you don't need to be fluent. You just need to have enough to be able to get around.
Yeah, definitely not. When it comes to languages, there are the levels. Like, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but there's N5 through N1. And N1 would be your native speaker. Like, if you're born in America and you've spoken English your entire life, you'd be an N1 in English. But if you just started learning a language, you'd be N5. Now, I did take one of the tests to see kind of where I was in the scale, and I was just on the edge of N5 into N4. And it wasn't because I couldn't read it, because I could read the Japanese. I just didn't know what all the words meant. So if I had a better understanding of a lot of the words, I could be N4, which definitely takes some effort, and I'm proud of myself for getting there. Yeah.
So I have never heard of this testing. Who declares this stuff? Is it like you get a black belt in Japanese? I mean, how?
It's an international thing, and see, now you have been wanting to look it up.
Because I mean,
I can't remember what it's called.
Growing up in the South, I mean, we speak a very different version of English than most people. So I'm wondering if I even qualify as an N1 English speaker at this point.
So for Japanese, it's called the Jlpt, Japanese Language Proficiency Test. And a friend of mine who lives in Japan, and he's from Ireland of all places. He's the Japanese man or Irish man in Japan. And he was the one teaching me about these tests. And it was afterwards I found out, somebody who does a lot of language told me that this is actually standard across the world, that all countries use this. They all just call it something different. And Japan is the JLPT.
Huh.
The thing is, there's also different dialects. I mean, even in Japan, you have different dialects where you go. And I think you can still be an N1, even if you're weird and Southern. Jay?
That's so... I had never heard of that. That's amazing. That's so now I can test myself when I get back from all these shows. It's like, oh, so I mean, on the other end of that spectrum, in terms of those of us who go to conferences with absolutely no language preparation either, I use Google Lens. It's like I would go, a lot of the restaurants in Poznan had English and Polish like menus, but even the ones that don't, you can take Google Lens and tell it to like automatically translate, and you just hold your phone up to the menu and it translates the whole menu there for you or whatever you're reading. I used it in Cologne when I was touring the big cathedral right there downtown, and it's because all the history stuff fascinates me anyway. But obviously, all the little plaques and information is all in German. But I would just like walk around looking like the total American tourist, holding my phone up to everything and getting it auto translated along the way.
Well, on that real quick, in Japan, there's because if you've never had Japanese curry, drop everything you're doing after the show is over and go get some right now. And there's a chain in Japan called Koko Ichibanya, which they actually have a few in America as well. But what I found really interesting, my friend is there reading the English menu and they're reading the Japanese menu. I happen to notice there's a sign off to the side in English that says they have a translation device they can give you to translate English into Japanese if you speak into it. I'm like, well, one, that kind of says how big of a deal Koko Ichibanya is with foreigners, and two, I just thought that was kind of cool. so
That is cool.
Yeah, it was the only place I actually saw that, though. We also kind of steered clear of a lot of the foreigner-only places, because my friend and I wanted to really enjoy the proper Japanese places. So So I only went to a hub once. Hub being a British bar in Japan where like all the foreigners go to. There's a chain of them all around, and there's one right by where TGS takes place.
So, in general, I mean, what do you suggest to indie teams in terms of getting ready and going to Japan? How do you prepare to make the most out of that show?
One, get the gold pass. It's not even a question. I did so much more business this year from having the gold pass than I did last year. So definitely spend the excess on that. And your entire team doesn't need to have it. I mean, me, I'm a team of 1 trying to act like a team of 30. So I just bought it for myself. So at least one person in your team who's going to do the meeting needs that. Have a gorgeous video demo available. If you can get your demo translated into Japanese, do that. However, keep in mind, you're only going to maybe talk with maybe 30% of your meetings will actually be with Japanese. I actually spoke with companies from all around the world. I mean, there are companies that are interested in taking Potato Tail, to the UK, to different parts of China, to various Spanish-speaking countries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what's very interesting about TGS is very, very international event. So that's also something to keep in mind that it takes place in Japan, but you're going to be doing business very internationally. So if you know in advance some of the regions you want to get into, like if you want to get into a Spanish-speaking region, see if you can translate your trailer into Spanish, specifically the version of Spanish for the area you want to get into. Obviously have a Japanese version, have a Mandarin, simple Chinese version, et cetera, have those ready. Pick up some of the language, pick up some Japanese, as I've said like 17 times now, and now 18, pick up some Japanese. Also, it's very good to just understand some of the cultural differences in general, which is a whole topic we can get into here as well. But understand the cultural differences and be ready for a lot of sweating and a lot.
But you cut out a lot of sweating and a lot of what?
Walking.
Well, we do that at shows anyway.
Oh, no. In Japan, I walk something like 30 miles in a week, according to my trackers.
That's a lot of walking.
That is a lot of walking.
Now, how did you end up walking 30 miles in a week if you were staying in the hotel attached to the conference center?
Oh, I didn't just do TGS.
Oh, okay.
Because I am a weeb and I have to get my nerd on.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, that's a good place to go get your nerd on. I mean, that's the whole draw of why I want to go personally anyway. So, let's talk about those cultural differences.
Yes.
I know from my experience, the business card ceremony. Hold on, sorry. So you hold your business card by the top 2 corners and you present it, and whoever you're meeting with does the very same thing. But then when you accept their card, you are supposed to look at it, study it, and appreciate it, not just like shove it in your pocket or staple it to your notebook.
So like you would hand it like this.
Yes.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, the way I saw it described was, because that's something else, you're going to want to make sure you have a business, one for your cards and one for effect. And the way it was described to me was, imagine if you gave somebody your hand and then they shoved that hand in their back pocket. That is the equivalent of taking somebody's business card in Japan and just shoving it in your pocket. Yeah, as Jay said, as you said there, Jay, you need to study it. Like, it has the map to the lost city of Atlantis hidden on that card. That is how hard you study the front and the back.
And it's a good thing. So are most of your meetings taking place like standing, or are there meeting tables, or where are you when you're actually having the meeting at TGS?
They're sitting tables.
Okay. So, just as a tip in general, it's always good once you accept, whoever you're meeting with's card, one, appreciate it for a few seconds, but then lay it down right there beside you, so you don't forget who you're talking to, and which sounds crazy, but especially when you have a meeting with 2 people from a company on the 3rd day of a show. And I had 37 meetings in Poland over 3 days. So your brain can get a little, drowsy on you. But,
And put them down in the order that they are on the table, too.
Yeah, see that? Yeah, I never thought about that either. But yeah, I mean, it's a good practice to be in anyway, and that way when you're, over in Japan, or even if you're here and you're working with, any kind of Asian country, you don't make that faux pas because you're just kind of like used to doing it that way.
Exactly.
So what else? So I mean, appreciate the business cards. Don't write all over them in front of the person. Obviously, after the meeting is over, if you need to take a note on the business card, you can do that. Just don't do it in front of them.
So that is obviously a very big one.
So what else?
There's also the volume of speaking. Definitely teach yourself to speak quiet, because if you don't, everybody will be staring at your loud American mouth.
All right. Well, I'm never going to 2GS. There we go.
Well, I taught myself to speak quiet, but even still, I tend to be the loudest one in the room. So that's a big one. Also, you don't do a lot of complaining over there. Like if there's something crappy that's going on politically, culturally to you, you don't tell someone, "Oh, my day's been terrible," unless they're like a good friend. You might run into somebody at something like PAX or something, and you ask them, "Hey, how's your week been?" They're like, "Oh, it's just been terrible," and they ramble to you for a moment. You don't do that in Japan. And equally, you don't boast about things you've done. If somebody asks you, what are some titles you've released or something, then maybe do it. Otherwise, don't be like, "Oh, yeah, it's great games." Because you're also going to get kind of shunned as well. Before we got into this call, I had like a giant list in my head of all the cultural differences, and now nothing.
But it's very much it's an exercise in humility, basically. I mean,
it is. It really is.
If you watch that, what was that Netflix show with the Japanese woman that came over and organized everybody's house? I forget, what it was.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about there, right?
Yeah, I watched it, and we tried doing some of that too.
Yeah, I tried that as well. It lasted about 3 days. I do now fold my T-shirts like she folded them because I can shove more of them in a drawer that way. But, the whole thing that she said was, as you're going through the clutter, and this gets back to, Japanese culture in general, you look at something and you appreciate it. And even though, and this is going to sound odd to those of us in the West and our, disposable society that we're in, even if you're going to discard that item, you thank it for what it has done for you. And even if it's like, if you tried something and it tasted like crap and you didn't like it, you still appreciate that item for teaching you that you didn't like it. There's always something to think about it. Thank, not think. And so it's not just in home organization or in how you do how you hand somebody a business card. It's very much a Japanese culture thing in general.
So does that mean you went around and thanked all the stuff in your house for 3 days and then decided, screw this, I'm not doing that anymore?
No, we got rid of a lot of stuff. It was a matter of, how much longer after that we kept it organized by the standards at which she presented everything. Like I said, we watched all the episodes of that show, and the only thing that I'm still doing is folding my T-shirts that way and putting them in the drawer.
Yeah, there's a concept in Japan called kintsugi, and what it is that they'll take broken pottery and repair it with this gold paste. And that concept alone, I think, really speaks droves to what the mentality is like in Japan, where basically even something that is broken can still be beautiful.
See, look at that. So, all right, let's really dive off the deep end here. culturally, and this is where we need to get Kate Edwards back, because Kate was with me, Kate and I were over at the Poslin thing together, and we had this conversation about all these cultural, questions that came up. So the question is, I wonder if that comes from the fact that they are an island nation who has had to, rely on imports for so long. It's not like us, where, if we need a new garbage can, we go down to Walmart and they have 500 of them for $6 and we just get one and use it till it breaks. When you're isolated on an island like that with limited natural resources and limited, goods coming in and out, you do that. The pot breaks. Okay, well, let's, find something nice looking, gold paste, and put it back together, and then we can still use it. Am I completely off the reservation on that one, or?
I remember actually reading about where kintsugi came from, and see, I've got the wiki article open in front of me here, and
while you're reading, I'll give you the example that came up in Poland. I was meeting with a mobile publisher, and we were talking about soft launching and testing and all of that sort of stuff. And he said, you have to be careful where you do it. But he said, when we soft launch a mobile game in Brazil, it gets very low scores. The retention is low. The average review is low. He said, we can take the same game and launch it in the Philippines, and the reviews are much higher. He says, as a matter of fact, we've actually done it before where we soft launched something in Brazil and then we launched it in the Philippines just literally to raise the reviews of it. And so we're having this conversation, and I knew I was meeting Kate later that day, and I was like, this is a good question for Kate. And I asked her when it was time for the meeting, and she said, it comes down to the way that the culture reviews things or, appreciates things in general. In Brazil, just by default, you start off, as a game, you start off at like a 0, and for everything that they like about it, you go up 1. So, oh, that's really nice, I'll give it 1 star. Oh, I really like that too, I'll give it 2 stars. And so your review kind of like works from the bottom up. And she said, and in the Philippines and a lot of other places in Asia, it's exactly the opposite. They appreciate the fact that you put all of this work and this, dedication into this game that they're now playing. So you kind of like start at a 5, and then for everything they don't like, you start going down the other way. I was like, that's fascinating. That's why we have that's why we ask you these questions.
That's such a difference. Wow. Yeah. I didn't realize that.
So what'd you find on Wikipedia?
So the theory of where this came from is that the Japanese shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa sent a damaged Chinese tea bowl back to China for repairs in the 15th century. But when it was returned, it was repaired with ugly metal staples, which may have prompted the Japanese craftsmen to look for a more aesthetic means of repair. Which, to itself right there, means that rather than just throwing out a broken item, they were still always trying to repair it. And the fact that it came back with what they called ugly metal staples kind of makes me think it was the Japanese who wanted to find a way to make things still be functional yet be aesthetic.
Huh. Well, we've got our first question from LinkedIn here.
Whoa. Hi, LinkedIn.
It's not showing up in our overall chat, so I don't know how that works. But anyway, so how are non-endemic working together with, or developers, or I'm guessing there's a word missing there, but how are non-endemic developers working together with game makers in Japan?
Non-endemic?
I had to look it up too, and I'm an English major. The opposite, it means the opposite and refers to media that don't regularly feature your brand or brands like yours. So how does the Japanese media react to Western indie games when they don't necessarily usually cover them at all?
It depends. It depends what your game is, for one. I mean, my game, Cats, so people love that. But it's also... there is a love of indie developers in Japan. They just don't exist in Japan for the most part. There are, and actually, I might something very fascinating I saw. But to kind of answer that question, they'll definitely pick out specific developers that they feel the Japanese public might be more interested in, or a product that they might be more interested in. But overall, the Japanese love the concept of indies, and they bring in. I mean, that's why the indie booths at TGS are primarily foreigners, because they want to show a lot of that. And there's actually another event in Japan as well. Actually, the name is escaping me right now because I need another cup of coffee. I'll post it on the links later when I look at it. But they also have a whole indie section, and they've actually, from what I've been told, so this may be incorrect, but what I've been told, they originally were trying to do just Japanese indies, but they got like 4 submissions because they couldn't find any. So they started opening it up and got numerous ones. So I'm not sure how much of an answer to your question that is, but if you are more cautious to the Japanese way of doing things, and you have a product that could be interesting over there, and you have connections, because it's very important for that if you actually want to get into the media. I got into the press because I have a friend there who worked with them. Then you could indeed get into the press like that. But go ahead.
Also, you basically need to have an in.
Absolutely, yeah. Originally, I thought you had to have an in for absolutely everything in Japan, but I've kind of learned that's not entirely true. You can be your own in, and in a lot of ways, I've become my own in just from learning Japanese, going to some of the more businessy events and understanding how to work with them and doing my own studying. But when it comes to things like the press, you're definitely going to need an in, which, again, you can become your own in if you meet the party.
All right, so is it worth it then when we factor in cost to go to TGS? So the ticket is cheaper. There is more business being done there than I think a lot of companies would recognize, realize. Is it worth hiring a Japanese marketing team or PR team to help you while you're there?
While you're there, no. But one of your goals while you're there should be finding a publisher for the Japanese market, because unlike America, and this has been my understanding, actually I think this has changed more recently, but it's not easy to just go and just publish a game in Japan. Plus the way to market and everything is different. So I wouldn't hire a marketing team to market things while you're there. I would find a publisher or marketing team there to get your game into the proper hands, the proper markets in Japan.
So I'm assuming, I'm going to ask anyway, but I'm assuming you're going to release Potato Tail in Japan.
When I was there in 2016, I showed it in Japanese. So,
okay,
yes.
So what stores are you going to release it on? I mean, is it just Steam, or are there other outlets for PC games?
Oh, well, we're console also. So that was actually that was our key focus over there, because we actually ported the game to PlayStation 4, Switch, and Xbox One about 1.5 years ago. So our engine is already fully functional on all platforms. So that actually helped us a lot that we were able to do that, since one of my companies is a porting studio. So it was really no big deal for us to make sure it already ran. And that was actually kind of funny, because most of the companies we talked to, they're like, usually people don't have it already ported at this point. And we're like, well, we're ported, let's do business. So that actually worked in our favor pretty well. But enough tooting my own horns.
Don't be bragging, Red. That's like against the rules.
I like how he said horns, not just horn. Tooting my own horns.
No.
Multiple horns. Yeah.
Smoke bomb. So yeah, we did a lot of publisher focus on console, especially. I mean, we already have a publisher, PC Mac in China, digital distribution of PC Mac. So we were definitely looking for console publishing in different countries, not just Japan. And I spoke to people who are interested in a number of countries. So
is there a good place that someone can go to research the Japanese publishing companies? Because I mean, I can't imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I can't imagine you're pitching to Capcom and Namco with an indie game. I mean, who is publishing indie games in Japan?
So that's going to be the trickiest piece of advice I'm going to have to give. When you're in Japan, stop being indie. Be AAA or AA. I treat my products over there like a AA, and that gets it far more interest. I will use the word indie, but everything is polished to the point that we do everything we can to not look indie over there. And because of that, I almost had a meeting with Square Enix, for example. The only reason they didn't is because they were booked. That's the main thing. When they're stop being indie.
Well, I mean, Square Enix has a indie division though with their collective.
They do, yeah, but not everybody does. But that doesn't stop them from meeting with you if you can talk the talk and walk the walk. A lot of the companies I met with had, like, for example, there's one company I met with. Their publishing partner is Konami.
Yeah.
So you definitely can have those kinds of meetings.
Interesting. All right, we're running low on time here because we were also organized this morning and we got started a little bit late. But any other points or pieces of advice that you want to hit on, Red? And anybody, if you're out there listening and you have a question, just throw it up in the chat on whatever platform you're on, and we'll see it and we can ask. But any other advice or things that people should be thinking of, or anything along the lines of TGS or just doing business in Japan in general?
Do your research. Google is your friend. Look on Meetup for local Japanese language. There's one here near me, and it's great because when we go, we don't just talk language, we also talk cultural things. They actually gave me a dumber piece of advice I had never heard of, because a lot of people that run these groups and attend these groups are natives of Japan. So definitely do that, because if you make a cultural faux pas over there, faux pas, what he said, that's going to probably be the worst thing you do. So just know what you're doing. And when you go to Japan, dude, stay extra time. Japan is gorgeous. Go there for like an extra week. Check out Akihabara. Go up to Mount Fuji. Go to the fish market. I know the classic fish market's closed now, but just take your time and enjoy.
And that's good anywhere too.
Oh, absolutely.
That's one of the things that my wife has been hammering into me over the last year or so, is when I do all this travel, go see shit.
Don't just stay in the convention center, huh?
When I was in China, I talked to somebody who had come over there for 48 hours for a business thing.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, wait, 15-hour flight from England, 48 hours, 15 hours back. And they're like, well, we're coming back in 3 weeks. I'm like, was this trip really that worth it?
Seriously. Holy shit. That's a haul.
Yeah. Don't do that, people.
Yeah, seriously. Well, dude, thank you so much for the insights and for, I will admit, I'm looking at Tokyo Game Show now as one to put on my serious list, in terms to get out there and go to. But for those of you who want to save some money, watch how I spin this into a pitch. We have our next online virtual business matchmaking event coming up on November 7th and 8th. And you can get a ticket like super cheap. You don't have to travel. Everything is video call, just like this. You don't have to know anybody. You find somebody in the Meet the Match system, send them a request, and when it is time for your meeting, you just click a button, nothing to install, and you go live on video. You can share your screen, show your game, talk, ask all the questions. And the best part is, well, aside from the fact that you don't have to travel, you actually have 30 minutes to talk to somebody. You don't have to worry about where's my next meeting and how do I have to get over there and is my flight going to get canceled? All of that stuff that we generally, have to stress on when we're at a conference doesn't exist because you just click and you talk to folks. Go to indiegame.business and you'll see all the information and how to get a ticket. And we got 50 some companies already signed up for this one. So it's going to be a good show. And yeah, what else we got, Indy?
12 Days of Indies coming up next month. Benefit for Toys for Tots. Woo! Sponsored by Indie Game Business, or Powell Group is one of the sponsors.
And so, yeah, if you're a developer out there and you want to contribute some codes either to 12 Days of Indie or to Operation Supply Drop, where we had Glenn on the other week, let one of us know. You can always find us on our Discord. It's discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. And yeah, that would be fantastic because we're always looking for stuff to give away, to help raise money for Toys for Tots.
Awesome. Is that it? Anything else?
I think so. Friday
Anchor FM, Anchor FM / Indie Game Business. Right?
What, huh?
Anchor FM.
Oh yeah, anchorfm.indiegamebusiness is the podcast. But Friday we've got Junie coming over from my brain just left. I know what Sodesco. Gosh, I couldn't remember the name of the publisher. And she's going to be answering all sorts of questions about what are the little things that publishers do for you that you don't even realize when you're going in and trying to figure out which publisher to choose.
Awesome. Excellent. All right, thank you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Red.
Thanks, Red.
Y'all have a great day.